Hey everyone, it's Natalie, also known as Knitty Natty. Today I'm sharing with you the 5 things that I always do before I start knitting a sweater. I have learned a lot through trial and error and making many sweaters, but I am by no means an expert. I will always share my honest experience with you, whether it's the good things that I've learned or all of the mistakes that I've made. Thanks so much to Bellish for sponsoring today's video. Bellish is a free pattern generating app to help you make your perfect pattern. I'm going to share more about how I'm using Bellish to design my own perfect sweater a little bit later on in the video when I share with you a real life example of these 5 tips. But you can check out how to use Bellish through my previous video or download it using the link in the description box below. Okay, I'm not going to leave you hanging. Here are the 5 things that I always do before I start knitting a sweater. Number 1, pick a pattern that flatters. Number 2, measure your body. Number 3, knit a gauge swatch. Number 4, pick the right size for intended fit. And number 5, adjust the fit with shaping. Let's talk about picking a pattern that flatters. That almost rhymes. So you might be scrolling through Instagram and you see like the latest designer's sweater pattern and you're like, oh my goodness, I love this, it's so cute, but maybe it's not the right pattern for you. So here are a few questions that I ask myself before I choose to knit a certain sweater pattern. And I'm not talking about like which types of sweaters best fit certain body shapes. That is all very personal, and whatever you feel like flatters you, that you feel good in, that looks good on you, that is great. So I'm talking about how can you look at a sweater pattern, look at the sweaters that you've knit or that you wear in your wardrobe and go, okay, am I going to wear this? Because I have made a lot of things that I end up not wearing. So here's those questions that I was talking about, the questions I ask myself before I knit any sweater. Question number 1, do I regularly wear items like this in my wardrobe, in my store-bought wardrobe? So like, do I always want to knit pullovers, but all I wear is cardigans? You kind of have to look at that and decide like, okay, does it make sense for me to make this, I don't know, cowl neck sweater when like every cowl neck sweater I've ever bought, I've returned? So look at the things that you already have and look at what you wear most and be honest with yourself about what you might actually wear once you've knit it. Is this a shape or style that I like on my body? So again, this is not about like X body type should wear X kind of sweater. This is about what personally feels good to you, what makes you feel amazing when you put it on, what makes you feel most comfortable, what makes you feel like you look amazing. Whatever your goal is there, start looking through your wardrobe. Again, this can be past hand knit items or store-bought ones, and you can look at the ones that you wear all the time and try to identify the common features. Maybe it's a certain neckline or a certain body shape or even a certain color or the way that it feels on you. You can also look at the things that you're not wearing and go, why am I not wearing this? Oh, maybe it has buttons and I don't like to do up buttons. I mean, it can be as simple as that. So look back at the things that you do like or don't like and start to identify some of the common factors in between. I found that for me, I really like things that are a little bit boxier, a little bit looser fitting. I tend to wear those more often, and especially things that are more of a neutral color because I can wear them with all kinds of clothes. Last question I asked myself, will I honestly wear this color or stitch pattern? I actually hear people say this a lot, like, oh my gosh, I love these colorwork sweaters, or you know, these really kind of louder sweaters, but I don't think I would actually wear them. They may be really fun to knit, and for some people that's all they want to do is just knit it. They don't actually like want to wear it later on, but if that's your intention with making a garment, which mine always is, or at least it starts out that way, you kind of have to look at your wardrobe again and go, am I really gonna wear this color, pattern, etc.? Is it gonna be, am I very casual and this is a little more dressy? What am I actually going to wear? So for me, I found that I like things that are a little more neutral, I tend to wear those just a little bit more, maybe a little bit simpler, a simpler silhouette. I don't want anything that's going to be too fussy, like I have to wear a certain type of bra with it or whatever. I need to be comfortable in the things that I'm wearing. Now that you've analyzed your wardrobe and found a great pattern that's going to meet all of your needs, it's time to measure your body. Let's toss out the narrow-minded idea that bodies come in small, medium, and large, and let's start looking at the actual numbers of our body so that we can pick the right size. So I like doing this before I knit a gauge swatch because then I can typically go on Ravelry or some other platform and it gives me enough information about the sizes that I can know right away if I'm going to be able to knit this pattern or not. And so if you do your measurements and then you go onto Ravelry and you find that your size is not there, toss that aside and look for a more size inclusive pattern. Okay, here are the places that I like to measure, and I am not a seamstress, so if you know better, then by all means take really, really good measurements of yourself in a different way, but these are just the terms and the measurements that I find useful for when I'm picking out my pattern size. So first I'm going to measure my upper bust, which is above your bust line, underneath your armpits, and is typically smaller than the bust. Next, I'm going to measure my full bust and make sure you're wearing the undergarments that you're going to wear when you're going to wear this outfit. You know, if it's a bra or if it's not, doesn't matter, but make sure you're measuring it the way that you intend to wear it. Then I go for my natural waist. To me, this just means when I bend over, where does that kind of crease lie? For some people, it's smaller or larger than the bust line, so this is an important measurement to have. Then I measure at my hip bones. I don't really know why. This is just kind of like for me, it helps me like see where it goes from my waist to the largest part of my body and like how fast it gets there. And then the last place on my body I measure is I just call this like the bottom band. It's basically where like the bottom of your sweater is going to hit. So if it's going to be really low, measure that. If it's going to be a little higher, like just under the hip bones, measure that. That's going to be, or that for me at least, is my largest part of my body. So I need to know that measurement. And then I've started to measure my arms because I've had to make some adjustments with sweaters in the armhole because it's a little too tight when I choose by my bust size. So I like to measure my upper arm, which is just like, you know, if you're doing a drop shoulder sweater, that's going to be a really good measurement for you to need. I like to measure around my shoulder, so it's more like the armpit kind of. So I like to check this measurement against armhole depth. I measure at my elbow and at my wrist. I've just knit a lot of sleeves where they're really, really big, and I don't like that. So I would rather do a little bit of decreasing to kind of, you know, make it fit a little more like I like. So I just keep a note in my phone with all of these measurements, and then before I start any sweater, I will remeasure just to see if things have changed. I'm about to cast on several sweaters, so I will just measure once and then compare to each of those patterns to pick the proper size. So you're looking for in the pattern basically you can look at your bust measurement because that's just a really good place to start, but your bust measurement plus 3 to 8 inches. And if there is a size that includes that in the like information before you buy the pattern, then you're good to go. If not, toss it aside because you need to find a more size inclusive pattern and you might not want to support that designer in the first place. We will come back to those measurements in just a minute, but for now, it's time to knit a gauge swatch. And please, for the love of everything, when you are making something that needs to fit like a sweater, knit a gauge swatch. I had somebody tell me the other day that because their gauge always lies to them and never tells them anything useful for their sweater, they just don't knit a gauge swatch. Please don't do that. And if that's you, I'm sorry. I told on you, but I don't remember who told me that anyway, so it's all good. But please, please knit a gauge swatch. Yes, there's a lot of discrepancy between a swatch that is small and a sweater that is large, but it can tell you so many useful things about your yarn, about the needles that you need to use. So hopefully these tips can help you knit a really great gauge swatch. So when you start your gauge swatch, it's recommended that you start with the needle size in the pattern that is the main needle size. For me, I typically always have to go down a needle size because I'm a looser knitter. So when I do a gauge swatch, I automatically go down one needle size and start from there. Gauge swatching is not a one-time process, so go ahead and plan that you're gonna make a couple of gauge swatches here. So step number one is choose the right needle size, the recommended one, or if you're always a tighter knitter or always a looser knitter, then you can start up one or down one needle size. Okay, this I see all of the time, and once somebody told me this tip, I was like, duh, why am I doing that? So when you knit a gauge swatch, do not just cast on the number of stitches that it says in 4 inches. Add 6 to 8 stitches so that you have something on the edge. That way you can measure in the middle of your swatch. So please, please don't cast on, let's say this recent sweater that I'm making says 25 stitches over 4 inches. You don't want to just cast on 25 stitches, work in stockinette, and then measure the whole swatch, because guess what ends do? They curl. And guess what edge stitches do? They're not full stitches, so it's not going to give you an accurate picture of what your gauge is going to look like. So when I'm really taking my time, I like to do a little garter border. Now you can kind of see, even though this is a blocked swatch, that it kind of like tucks in on the side. So when you measure your swatch, which yes, you need to block it, I'll talk about that too, measure it in the middle. Don't measure too close to the right or left edge, even close to like a garter edge or the cast on or bind off. All of that is going to affect your stitches, which is why you want to try to measure smack dab in the middle in a couple of different spots around here. Again, we're not measuring over 4 inches. You don't have to, I'll tell you a trick, but you don't want to go too far over to any edge of your square. So you do need to wash and block your swatch, because unless you're planning not to wash your sweater, which is like, one, it's kind of gross, but two, like blocking changes your yarn. Blocking like releases your stitches. It's incredible. You must block. So I often don't even put soap on my swatches. I just let them soak in a little tub, and then I kind of pin them out to dry. Let them dry all the way before you measure. I mean, I always measure it when it's wet just to see how close I am. But once it dries, that's going to give you a much more accurate picture of what your gauge will be on a finished sweater. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go actually measure gauge. Make sure you lay your swatch down on a completely flat surface, and then you need one of these measuring tapes that's completely flat on the ends that will stay out, and you don't have to touch it because you need both your hands free to count this thing. So you want to put your measuring tape in the center, and we are going to count our stitches over 2 inches. You can also do 3, but please don't do 4, because it's likely that you didn't cast on enough stitches to measure 4 inches of middle stitches and get a really accurate count. Again, we're avoiding the edges. So I like to measure over 2 stitches, 2 inches, 2 stitches. I like to measure over 2 inches, and then if you divide in half, you'll get your stitch per inch gauge, or if you double, you'll get your full gauge of 4 inches. You can move around in a couple different places in the middle of the swatch. You want to measure a couple different times, because sometimes a stitch can just be wonky and you can be off by a whole half a stitch, which can make a huge difference in the overall sweater. Here's the other thing that can trip people up a lot of the time. So if you measure and you have too many stitches per inch, you actually need to go up a needle size. Too many stitches per inch means you're getting more stitches crammed in there than you need. That makes your gauge actually smaller than you need it, and so you need to go up a needle size. If you have too few stitches per inch, that means you're not getting enough stitches in there. Your gauge is too big and you need to swatch again, going down a needle size. Step number 4, now it's time to pick a size with the intended ease. Here is a super common misconception. You should pick the sweater size that is the same as your bust size. No, it's not often that way. So pattern sizes can be written in 2 main ways. Sometimes the pattern will say to fit a person that is this bust measurement. So that's when you would actually be able to go, okay, I measure 36 inches in my bust, I can pick the size 36. But most of the time you're gonna see something that says finished bust measurements. That means the sweater, when it is knit and blocked, is going to measure however many inches are in that size. So if it says 36 inches, the finished sweater would be 36 inches. And you really don't want to knit a sweater that is exactly the same size as your body, at least most of the time. Most sweaters have between 1 to 5 or more inches of positive ease, which I'm going to talk about next. So you want to be really careful when you pick the size of your sweater. You're probably going to pick a size that is bigger than your bust. So take a look at your favorite sweater and pinch the side of it to see how much fabric is there. You might want to put like a little safety pin in, and then you can take it off and you can measure that distance, and then of course double it, because at the seam that's only halfway. This is the ease on your sweater. So positive ease is going to be a looser fit, negative ease is going to be a tighter fit, and then zero ease is just like form fitting. You're the same size as your sweater. So most garments will have positive ease of 1 inch or more, and I love when a sweater actually tells me, like when the designer actually says, okay, so here are the bust sizes. We'll just keep using 36 for the example. Here's bust size 36. The pattern is intended to be worn with 4 to 6 inches of positive ease. So the person who knits sweater size 36, finished sweater size 36, needs to be actually 4 to 6 inches smaller, because there needs to be 4 to 6 inches of positive ease. So if my bust is 30 inches, I need 6 inches of positive ease, so we add. I need to knit the size that is 36 inches. So check your pattern to see if there is intended ease in there, and then check the sizes. Does it say to fit a bust of this number or finished bust size? And then pick the right size from there. Lastly, we're going to adjust for shaping. And after this, I have a full sample, like example for you using the Bellish app. I can't wait to show you. So stick around, it's gonna be great. Okay, so let's talk about shaping. I'm not gonna walk through how to do all different kinds of shaping like bust darts and waist shaping and A-line shaping, because guess what? I don't know how to do all of that. I only know my body, and I have been experimenting with different things that work for me. But here are several things that I've learned to keep an eye out on. So you're probably wondering, why did we take a million measurements when all we looked at was the bust? That is just a starting place. So once you've picked the correct bust size with your intended ease, now I want you to go to the sweater and look at the schematic. Look through the schematic and look at all of the different measurements. Hopefully it doesn't just give you bust size, hopefully it gives you a few more. If the sweater has no shaping, then you can expect whatever it measures at the bust to also be what it measures down at the bottom band of the sweater. Okay, so for me, I know that's not going to work because my bust size is much, much smaller than my hips are. So I need a little bit of extra fabric there. And I can do this by, if I'm knitting the sweater top down, I can add in a few increases on the side here. What I've learned recently, you've seen me make these past few sweaters, is that you don't need quite as much ease down low as you do up here. So let's say I'm knitting a sweater and I have 6 inches of positive ease here. Let's say I measure 30 inches. I don't, but let's say I measure 30 inches around and I'm knitting size 36, so I have 6 inches of positive ease. What I thought is that I would want to calculate how I could have 6 inches of positive ease all the way down, but I realized that that made much too big of a sweater. So now I'm realizing around my hips and stuff, I need about 2 inches of positive ease. So let's say that I'm measuring 30 at my bust and 40 inches at my hips. That's a 10-inch difference. But down here at my hips, where I'm 40 inches, I only want to get to a 42-inch circumference. So I want to go from 36, 6 inches of positive ease, to 42. So I need to calculate how I can increase going from bust to the bottom waistband, and I do that with a fair bit of math. So again, I'm not going to go through exactly how to do that, but it is doable and it is not super, super hard. So that's one thing I always look out for. You may have the opposite problem where you are bustier and then you need to do some decreasing, for your body so that you're not swimming in your sweater. All of our bodies are different. Maybe your largest measurement is your tummy, and so you want to make sure when you choose a bust size, it's not going to be too tight for you on the largest part of your body. So just take a look through there. It might mean that you want to pick the bust size that fits the largest part of your body. Just to keep things simple, you can just knit a straight down sweater. That works out just fine as well. It's not going to look as fitted, but it will definitely work and it will fit you. Now, the other thing that I am always looking out for is armholes and sleeves. So armholes, for whatever reason, and sleeves too, they just seem to be really tricky. And I'm not a sweater designer, so I'm not going to pretend that I would do any better on this. But what can happen is, as a designer, it's called grading. Like as they're creating new sizes for the sweater, they are not actually knitting every single size and trying it on a person who is that size. They are basically taking how they fit it to themselves and using percentages, they're making it bigger. Not everyone does this, but that's kind of like the most basic formula. So what that can mean is that, you know, what looked really, really good on somebody who was a 34-inch bust is now like you're knitting for a 52-inch bust and your sleeves are massive. They're way too big. You don't need the sleeves that big. Or what happens for me, because my bust size is small, and the rest of my body is not that small, my armholes are way too tight and I can't like move around in them. So a couple things that you can do if you are like knitting the armhole depth is you can look at your shoulder measurement and you can look at your upper arm measurement, and then you can go back to the pattern and say, okay, which size of the armhole looks right for my body? It may be a size up or down from your bust size, and it's actually quite easy to just change and insert like a different armhole size. So if I'm knitting a sweater top down, I will still cast on for my bust, but then I will knit until I get the length that I need for the next size up, because for me, I need to have a longer armhole most of the time. And then same thing, when I go to those sleeves, I'm going to make sure, like, let's use small and medium for a minute, even though I kind of hate that. Let's say I started out knitting a small, but I realized that the small, my armhole would be too small. And so I knit to the length of a medium. And so when I go to pick up stitches for my sleeve, I also need to be looking at the instructions for a medium so that I pick up enough stitches for my arm. Now, where this can get a little bit tricky is if you change things in the arm, obviously the whole arm will be different. And so that's when I want to do often like some extra decreasing here for my wrists and stuff, because as my arms get smaller, I don't want big flared out sleeves unless that's the intention of the pattern, but I am able to adjust those things. So if you're like, this is way too overwhelming, Natalie, you didn't give me any clear instructions on that, I know it's something that kind of, you know, I'm still learning as I go, but know that it is possible. And why not knit and crochet sweaters for yourself that are going to fit you better than store-bought sweaters? So it's totally worth trying things on and adjusting as you go. All right, so let's talk through an example. This is a sweater that I haven't even started yet, that I'm honestly still scheming, so I don't have everything in place right now, but I am going to be designing my own sweater through using the app Bellish. Again, I've got a whole video where I knit a baby sweater using the app, but this time I'm going to be changing things up a bit. I'm going to be customizing things a little bit more for myself, so I'm going to be using Bellish as a template. So let's go ahead and open up the app and get started on picking some things. So first, I put a lot of thought into what type of sweater that I want to make, and I'm aiming for a very cozy, oversized sweatshirt type sweater. So I am going to go for a drop shoulder raglan sweater. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my base as the drop shoulder pullover sweater. I think being in New York, I'm actually going to wear that a lot, so I'm very excited about that. I'm going to go ahead and stick with a full-length sweater. I am going to do a scoop neck because I know I like that more. I don't like things like up on my neck too much. Now, as far as the patterns go, I'm going to be changing things up here a little bit. So I'm not going to actually be using one of the stitch patterns here in the app, but I'm going to be using one of my own. So I'm just going to click on one that will kind of give us an idea of what I'm going to be doing, which is going to be an all over pattern with just ribbing and plain old sleeves. And for the weight, what I'm aiming for, I think is going to be actually kind of a bulky weight. So we'll see. I don't 100% know that for sure yet, but I think it's going to be a bulky weight. Again, more to come. Watch the podcast because I'm going to be taking you week by week through how it's going. Okay, so here we're getting to a size. So using the Bellish app is of course a little bit different than looking at the pattern, but it does give me the information that I need. It says, choose the size closest to your actual bust measurement. So this would be the same as a pattern that says, these are the bust sizes, not the finished sizes. So I'm gonna choose, I think my bust size is there. Small, 36. Now, if I look at the schematic here, it's giving me a lot of useful information. It's telling me how big the finished bust is gonna be, which is 43 inches. So that's 9 inches of positive ease. That's a lot. It's gonna be an oversized sweater. It's gonna be the same all the way down, so I can compare that to my hip measurement. And then if I look at the sleeves, it's 24 inches around. For me, that is too big. That is very oversized. So I'm gonna be doing some adjusting as I go throughout the pattern because I don't want anything to be too big for me, but I know that I've got it, so that's fine. Of course, I'm gonna be making gray because I know myself and I know what I will wear, and gray is a neutral, and so I love to wear gray. Okay, so there we go. I've walked through the pattern. So of course my next step would be to make a gauge swatch, which I'm not going to do right now, but trust me on that I will make a really good gauge swatch. So I've already picked my size, but I'm just going to go through and make sure everything looks good because I'm going to be adjusting it to fit me really well. So I know that when I get to the armhole piece, I don't want mine to be 24 inches. That's way too big. So if I scroll down, and I will go back and scroll down through the pattern, I can see where I'm going to need to make adjustments on splitting for the sleeves. I'm going to need to go a little longer before I actually split because I don't want them to be that long, or I can adjust the armhole and just not knit it quite as tall. There you have it. Those are the 5 things that I do before I knit a sweater. Keep following along because I'm going to be posting all about the sweater I'm designing using the Bellish app all throughout my podcast this fall. I'm hopefully going to be wearing it to Rhinebeck, so look out for it there. Is there anything else that you would add to this list that you make sure to do before you knit a sweater? Let me know. Do you need a sweater? Yes. Before you knit a sweater, let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear all of your tips. I will see you in the next video. Bye!